Welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another Entitled Parents Reddit video. In our first story, property management and entitled mothers. Let's jump right in. I'm in property management and I've seen some stuff overall. I'd like to apologize in advance for any misspellings or grammar. I'm dyslexic and life is hard sometimes. When touring prospects, sometimes I deal with them and their parents. Normally, it's them just standing back, watching their kids navigate and asking questions on their behalf. But sometimes I get straight up mama's boys. I've had two that stick out for me. First, there was a kid who was applying with a friend of his. He was 19 and they were in a hurry. This happens when people put in notice and then scramble to find a new place before their lease ends. They both didn't have rental history, so they went in with the prepayment plan. This just means you pay last month's rent when you move in. A lot of people do it. So they passed their background checks and I gave them the move-in information. They're set to move in like 2 days. Sign the lease online, pay in advance, pretty easy lease. Nope. In enters entitled mother. She calls the day they move in pissed as hell. Hello and thank you for calling insert apartment complex here. Do you know you rented illegally to a minor? Can you explain further, ma'am? This lady goes on a rant for about 15 minutes about how her legally of age son moved out and how I was breaking the law for renting him and his friend a home. She told me she was going to sue me for renting to him. Now, due to fair housing laws, I can't even confirm or deny if someone lives here unless it's to a police officer. And she hated that. Called me everything under the sun, and while telling me I was stealing her baby boy from her and how I was going to pay for it. Turns out she went on vacation, and when she got home, her son moved out everything of his without telling her or his dad. She demanded that I end the lease and make him move out, at which point I just laughed. It took almost legally banning her from the property because we caught her trying to break into our secured buildings, trying to find out what apartment was her son's. Poor kid even rented a garage so that she couldn't find his car. Here's number 2. I toured apartments to an almost 30-year-old man and his mother. While taking down the information on what kind of home are you looking for, when are you looking to move, is there anything you would like in your next home, the mother answered everything. When I finally got to the point where I'm like, I need your phone number and email, the mom tried to give me hers. I was getting confused and asked point blank who was living in the home, thinking maybe I misunderstood something. I didn't. Eventually, I got his information, and after touring, I finally got him to open up a little. He really liked the one bedroom where the entitled mother was underwhelmed. When they left, I was not sure if I would ever hear back from them. A few days later, when I was doing my follow-ups, the entitled mother emailed me to say her son was no longer interested in our property. So you can imagine that I was very surprised when I saw her son's application come through. He was approved on his own and a move-in date was set. He had signed his lease online, but when I tried to set up a move-in time, radio silence. He comes in the day before the lease started with his mother, stating that he needed to cancel his lease. This woman stood over her 30-year-old son as he wrote me a nearly $4,000 check for breaking a 12-month lease because he didn't choose the apartment she liked. I could tell he was humiliated, and I was so embarrassed for him. It was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever had to do at my job. Story number 2, entitled mother tries to get me fired. Luckily, I have evidence. Hello, so I've recently become a teacher, and of course I've had plenty of run-ins with entitled parents, so I thought I'd share one in my class. I teach K-6. For context, Sydney is in lockdown and has been since July, so we've been doing school remotely for about 10 weeks at this point of the school year, so this is all during online learning. With our lessons, we use Google Classroom and Google Slides, and sometimes we give out interactive worksheets using separate Google Slides. Students then hand in their work on Google Classroom, where I can mark it. We also use Zoom to interact with the kids. We have daily 9:30 Zoom meetings to go through the work for 30 minutes, then I read with some of the kids. I usually finish Zooming at about 11 a.m. Then, throughout the day, I offer children who are struggling extra Zoom lessons and support if they need something explained to them, mainly if it's too hard to explain to them over Google Classroom. The Zoom are recorded for child protection laws. This is a statewide all levels of education thing, so this happens with high schools and university Zooms. It's just for protection. Now, I should also note we start our school year in January, and I've taken over this class from another teacher who went on leave. Sorry for the long context, but let's get started. So, it's a typical day. I'm sitting at my desk getting some work done for future lessons when I see a message come up on Google Classroom. It's from one of my students. She's really sweet. She's struggling to submit work, so I hop into a Zoom and I spend about 20 minutes going over how to submit work and walk her through it so she understands for next time. The next day, I again get a message from the student asking for help, so I hop into a Zoom again and go through it with her again. Sometimes kids need clarity. My students are 8 or 9 years old. So next day, guess what happens? If you guessed the student needed help, you get a star on your star chart. Again, I hop into a Zoom a third time, but this time the mother is there. This time she seems a bit frustrated at me for not showing her daughter how to submit when I tell her we have been doing this for 2 days already. She looks at her daughter, then says, "Well, obviously your instructions aren't good enough for my daughter. Can't you be more clear?" Now, when you work with young children, they aren't going to get something first go. I get that. Sometimes they need a few times to get it right. I explain this to the mother, and she, a bit irritated, says to me, "Well, explain it to me so I know how to do it." I walk them both through how to submit work, and we end it there. The next day, I have this student in one of my reading groups. Now, she was meant to leave the reading group, but obviously didn't do it right, and she was still in the meeting with her mic on. I was still talking to another student and their nice mom and going through work when we both heard this conversation. For your information, I was screen sharing and didn't realize she had her mic on as I wasn't paying attention, more focused on explaining. So how did it go? Good. I loved the book we read. Was he doing a good enough job? I need to talk to the principal. Something has... At that point, I was able to finally mute her and kick her out of the meeting before she realized I could hear her. I apologized to the nice mom and kid still in the meeting and moved on. The next day, I got a phone call. It was from my principal. Now, my principal is a fantastic man. He defends his staff and treats them with absolute respect. So, he calls to tell me that he got a complaint about me. He explained what the complaint was and was following up with me. Now, if you guessed the complaint was from entitled Mother, you get another star on your chart. Our principal explained to me that entitled Mother had said I was unhelpful with her daughter. I was constantly unavailable, and when I did help, I was rude, standoffish to her and her daughter. I constantly kick her out of Zoom meetings because I don't like her, and I should be fired. And the old teacher should return. Now, my principal, the absolute legend, said he would investigate the matter and get back to her. He's not one to believe everything without getting all the facts first. So I explain my side of the story and tell him the entire story. The mother being irritated during Zoom 3, the conversation that was heard, and explained why I kicked the student out of the meeting. We then went through the recordings and we clarified that my side was entirely true. My principal thanked me, explained to me that this isn't the first time she complained. She did the same thing last year during remote learning. When the students got back, he just figured she liked the old teacher better, who admittedly is an amazing teacher. She probably doesn't like newly graduated teachers. Her teacher last year was a new grad teacher too. He also told me it was a good lesson for me on how crazy some parents can be. So he said he'd ring her back and deal with her. I later heard from the principal that it was all dealt with and I didn't need to stress. He's a top bloke. Big thank you to all those wonderful people who gave me the awards. You didn't have to. I don't deserve them. Thank you though. I greatly appreciate it. This is John from /bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to be the first to know when the next one drops, subscribe and hit that notifications bell. I'd love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends. See you in the next one.